So again, this was the tenths, and you want to look to the number to the right of it. It was a 5, which is 5 or above, round up, gave you 27.3. The next one, number 10, said round to the thousands. Here's the thousands place if you work your way out. And so the number to the right of that is a 4, which means we round down. So this will be 16.253 when we finally round this. The next one, if I can get to my next slide here. The next one again uses PEMDAS, and the key here is to remember big numbers go to big numbers and little numbers go to little numbers, or in other words, only big numbers can change big numbers. So if you're looking at this problem number 15, you'll see 4 is raised to the third power, and then outside of it is the little number, the exponent 2. And we said again, this is multiplication when you send things inside the parentheses. So we got a couple options here. One is to send this 2 inside it, and we're going to multiply. Remember, only the little numbers can be affected. So you would think of this as 4 raised to the 3 times 2 power, or in other words, 4 raised to the 6th. And then you would simplify that. The other way to think about it, if you use PEMDAS, is do what's in the parentheses first, which would mean do 4 cubed. And here's how both those ways would look. If we send it in, you do 3 times 2 and get 4 to the 6th, which means 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. So you're doing it 6 times, which should give you 4,096. If you do it the second way, you do what's inside parentheses first. You're saying 4 times 4 times 4 because it's cubed, so you do it 3 times. Should give you 64, and then you'll notice it's squared on the outside. So that'll give you 64 squared, which is really just 64 times 64, and again that'll still get you to 4,096. So same thing's happening here. If you have a parentheses outside of a parentheses, notice none of these are exponents. They're all big letters, not because they're capitalized, but because they're not exponents. So what you're going to wind up doing here is sending this x into the other parentheses, and it's going to be sent into both things here. So the x times the x, and then you're going to do the x times the y. Then we're going to take this y, send it in, so it's going to be y times x, and then you're going to send it in again. This will be y times y. So what's going to happen is x times x gives you x squared, then you send the x to the y, should give you minus xy. Then you'll send the y into the x, it'll give you a positive xy, and then the y into the y, which should give you negative y squared. So what's going to happen here is we want to simplify. If we have negative xy and we have positive xy, that should give us 0 xy's because they'll cancel each other, leaving us with just x squared minus y squared. Okay, so the next problem, I'm going to give you a little review and then I'll tell you which number this was. One of your test reviews talks about factoring, which means instead of putting things in the parentheses, you're going to pull them back out. So in other words, if I have x squared, that really just meant that I did x times x. So if I factor it, it's going to look like this. If I have 2ab plus 5b, I'm going to look for something in common for both of these. And you'll notice they both have b, so if I factor it, I might pull the b out. And remember we said parentheses mean multiply, so what's left inside is 2a plus 5. So if I ever needed to send it back into both of these, it would get me back to my original problem. Now, as you notice, that x squared, y squared kind of look like this in the end on the last slide. And it's because you had a negative b and you had a positive b, so it created this negative positive that canceled out those middle terms. So that's something I wanted to point out to you, because in test number 2, if you look at problem number 19, they ask you to factor a squared minus b squared, and it's not as easy as pulling like 2 x's apart or pulling a b out where it's real obvious. You'll notice you had your squared on both sides, but there was no middle term. And the reason for that is because inside these two things, once you send it in to both, the negative and the positive are going to wind up canceling that middle term. Let's find another problem here.